Gerhard Papenfus from the National Employers Association of South Africa, who's the Chief Executive of the organization, is here with us in the studio. And on the line, we have been joined by Leon Louw of Free Market Foundation and Ian Ollis, who's the DA Shadow Minister of Labour. Gentlemen, welcome to the show. It's going to be very interesting to talk to all of us. But let's start here in the studio because he took out the time to be here. Gerhard, thank you very much for joining us. Let's talk about the 3,500. Is it enough?
You know, we've never been in favour of this, first of all, but we're beyond the debate of whether we must have a minimum wage or not. A country with this level of unemployment can't really afford that. Yeah. That's the argument. But beyond that, so if we focus on this and not arguing whether it's good or bad to have it, I don't think that when I heard the figure of 3,500 rand, I thought it's reasonable. Many employers, many industries who is already paying fixed wages, fixed by bargaining councils, sectoral determinations, are paying much more than that. But many are paying less than that. And in the next 2 years, there's industries that will have to adjust between 20 and 30% to get to that level. And the question is, will they adjust? Can they adjust? And there are industries we will simply have to adjust in terms of the wage, which, for instance, the private security industry, you can't have less guards. You must have a certain number of guards. Yeah. So the price of the service will increase. In retail, the price of commodities will increase. There's no doubt that you can't have less people at the till. You still will have to have the same number. So the person in retail who will get a bigger salary will also pay more for bread and milk and all these things. So, you know, it's not just getting a bigger salary, you will also pay more. So it's not that simple. You know, we're not going to manufacture ourselves out of our crisis through a higher wage. We'll have to grow the economy. Yeah. That is the only answer. Yeah. And the argument that we will boost the economy, well, if that is the answer, then the question is, why don't you increase the wage too much more? Yeah. So it's a very complex issue, and one in which we will have to tread very carefully.
Let's find out what Leon thinks there. Leon Louw from the Free Market Foundation. Leon, you've been listening to Gerhard there, and obviously you have your views at the Free Market Foundation. You are at the helm of this particular discussion. What are your thoughts with the 3.5 bit that's been proposed?
Well, Gerhard raised an important point. If people think 3.5 is good, I want to know, why are they so mean? 3.5 isn't enough. Why isn't it 13.5 or 1 million a month? Yeah. And the answer as to why they say 3.5 instead of something more is because they know, and in this they, I'm afraid, are being dishonest, they know precisely that if you raise the wage, you increase unemployment. So what they do is they recommend an increase where the increased unemployment will be what one of them calls statistically insignificant, which means another 500,000 or another 1 million destitute people for them is insignificant. That's the word that was used by the research team at Cape Town University, at Wits. So the answer is that what it will do is increase unemployment. That means we already have nearly 9 million. We'll have maybe 10 million unemployed people. That is 10 million people not producing wealth, which means the economy will be poorer. Inequality will grow because the inequality between unemployed and employed people will grow. There will be more unemployed people. The underground and illegal economy will grow because they're not going to die. They're going to go and earn a living somewhere that is technically illegal, like being illegal traders or informal businesses in backyards. And so what will happen is that the destitute South Africans, not the people who are employed by Gerhard's members, they're very lucky, they have a job. But what will happen is destitute and vulnerable people, unskilled people, elderly people, rural migrants, people without the ability to be productive, they will become more destitute, more unemployed, more desperate, and more poor, and the economy will be more poor. But I also want to point out they excluded domestic and agricultural workers.
Yeah.
Well, why did they do that? And the answer is they did it because they know that it will cause unemployment. So it shows that this is not motivated by compassion or care at all. This is motivated by ideological kind of madness that says you want a minimum wage for cosmetic reasons, no matter how devastating it's going to be for society's most vulnerable people. And also, if it's going to cause unemployment in agriculture and domestic workers, what on earth would the economic theory be that says it's not going to cause unemployment somewhere else?
Yeah.
Gerhard quite rightly raises places that are inflexible, that is to say where it's not easy to substitute people with machines. Hairdressing is another example. But wherever you can substitute people with technology, for example, in the fruit packaging industry, they have already replaced something like 3,000 workers in the cereals industry by machines. They just send the workers away, they put in machines, never go on strike, never make wage demands, never go to the CCMA or the bargaining council. They work 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and 3,000 workers are destitute. That is the consequence of a minimum wage. It's unavoidable, basic economics, simple economics, and in South Africa, it is cruel and inhumane. It is unbelievable that somebody can go to bed at night knowing that they have done this to their fellow South Africans.
Leon, I want to bring in Ian Ollis here, the DA Shadow Minister of Labour, and hear what his thoughts are, because obviously there are very much sensitive labour issues that are involved here, but not most particularly minimum wages in the world are a practice that is the norm, but the dynamics and the domestic sphere is completely different from the South African side of matters, where we have a high employment of foreign employees, for example, who will be able to penetrate the market at a better and much more of a less of a price, or rather less of a salary, and those are some of the challenges the South African economy will face. But let's find out from Ian. Ian, what are your thoughts on this proposed 3,500, and do you see it actually improving the lives of the South African employees?
Look, there are two things that we have to consider when we look at the question of minimum wages. The first one is, of course, this mass of 8.9 million unemployed people who need to find it easier to find a job.
Yeah.
That is unquestionably one of our biggest problems in South Africa. The second problem we have is, of course, that there are many, many South Africans who earn a wage that is so small that they would battle to raise a family or even look after themselves on that wage. Both of those are problems in South Africa, and we can't pretend that they're not there. We have taken the approach to say that, first of all, there is nowhere in the world where we don't have some form of minimum wage, basically. There are one or two small countries that do not have a minimum wage of some kind, but there are very many different forms of minimum wages that exist in the world. For example, in China, they have got each province and each major city or built-up area has a different minimum wage to other provinces or other areas in the country. And they've recognized that one size doesn't fit all. We also think, as the DA, that in South Africa, one size does not fit all. And we've said that our policy is that we should try to have sectoral minimum wages, which takes into account the unique circumstances in a particular industry or in a particular sector. Already this document that we've got from NEDLAC and from this research panel shows, as has been mentioned by my other two debaters tonight, that there are already sectors which are not going to have the full 3,500 minimum wage applied to them, and those sectors are domestic workers, forestry workers, and farm workers. We, as a DA, however, think that we have to look broader than that. And so a one-size-fits-all national minimum wage is very dangerous to implement from the word go at a particular level without knowing what the implications and the consequences are going to be. It could possibly lead to job losses that are significant. And we are not going to know that beforehand. And so we don't believe that one size fits all is going to be the ideal solution. We believe that each sector should be looked at differently, and there are also different living costs. You know, the cost of living in a city like Johannesburg is quite different from the cost of living in a rural area in South Africa.
But did we not have that already? I mean, I thought that we have like a standard practice where we say in Johannesburg, where obviously the cost of living is a bit higher, your domestic workers on average had already an internal sort of set minimum wage of 16.5 rand, I believe, an hour.
There are currently with domestic work and one or two other sectors a difference between the urban and rural areas, and we believe that's a good thing. Why should we stop that? The cost of
I don't know. I thought you were going to tell me. I thought Ian, you were going to tell me.
No, we believe that a sectoral minimum wage is the way to go, and not a one-size-fits-all.
Gerhard, do you agree with Ian that we should have a sectorial minimum wage, and maybe that will curb the problem that we have, as opposed to just having a blanket arrangement?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, if you have it, if you must have a minimum wage, which I believe we don't need to have, but if you must have that, that's the current arrangement.
Yeah.
And I mean, if you look at the sectors, the metal industry is now on 40 Rand an hour, motor industry 25, down to 11 Rand in certain sectors, and it's now all cramped up into one figure with the exception of farm workers and domestics. So, you know, as I said, this will cause some sectors to make a 30% adjustment in the next 2 years. And you know, there are certain market powers that will determine whether they will be able to do that, and if they do it, somebody else will pay for that.
But Gerhard, what about the fact that inequality is still a serious issue in this country, and the fact that, you know, we're not seeing those the middle class growing to a level where we are comfortable so that we can grow as a country? We are projected to grow by 0.4% this year alone. How do we curb those particular issues?
Well, this, you know, and it's always the same thing, unless, you know, the biggest driver of inequality and poverty is joblessness.
Yes.
That's the number one thing.
That's true.
I mean, if the economy in South Africa was functioning in a way that we had a 3, 4, 5% unemployment level, the whole scenario would have been totally different. We are in an employment level of somewhere between, unofficially, close to 40%.
Yeah.
Now, to sort that out, to think that you will sort it out, to give a family, a breadwinner, a wage of 3,500 Rand is not going to solve the problem. Unfortunately, it's simply too little.
Yeah.
So, you know, I think it's symbolic of some value. It won't make a real difference. It is, and I think when government said that they will do it, they put themselves onto a path where they were forced to do something. What we need in this country is that we need to bring unemployment down to below 10%. If that happens, when in a household there's no longer one person that look after 8, but that every person works for himself, that will drive change, that will grow.
You know what I think, Gerhard? We need to get rid of our debt. If we can get rid of our debt-based growth, then we might have some solutions there for you. Thank you so much for joining us in studio. Really appreciate it. That was Gerhard Papenfus from the National Employers Association of South Africa, and also thank you to Leon Louw, who's from the Free Market Foundation, and Ian Ollis, who also is the DA Shadow Minister of Labour. It seems like a very difficult one to get around, but hopefully we'll come up with a solution that will help the country go.